Thank you, Mr. Garamendi. 5 minutes, questions. Mr. Fenstead.
Thank you, Chairman Walz and Ranking Member Garamendi. Thank you as well to our witnesses for testifying and being here today. So as we've heard already here today, the housing infrastructure of our Defense Department facilities are critical to the national security of our great country. The installations are the facilities from which we project power. American strength can reach into all geographic regions and theaters of operation throughout the world. And just as important, this subcommittee must work to ensure that our military families have quality homes so that our service members are free to focus on lethality, execution of their lawful duties, and Mr. Chairman, to your point, maybe not as focused on fixing the HVAC systems. With the strategic importance of these issues clearly established, I want to ensure that we're considering the whole of the military. It appears that most of the statements presented here today are primarily focused on active components of our military. As a proud member serving southern Minnesota with a strong heritage in folks that have served in our National Guard, it's important to talk about the totality of our military. So this is important, and significant portion of our military resides in that Reserve and National Guard component. Too often, Guard and Reserve equities are considered after the fact, and this has a detrimental impact on readiness. So my question is pretty simple, and it's straightforward. We'll maybe start with Mr. Owens and see if we can get it answered there. The Reserve Centers, National Guard armories, and training installations primarily utilized by the Guard and Reserve, are they being properly considered in infrastructure investments, and if so, how?
Thank you for the question. In terms of what you mean by properly considered, like in relation to the rest of the things that we're dealing with?
Specifically, so we've heard already a lot about the housing. Really, just give me a flavor of what is being considered. How are we looking at the Guard, the Reserve, and the specifically armories in regards to the aging infrastructure and needs that we have out there?
I'd be more comfortable deferring to my service member colleagues.
Congressman, the Guard and the Reserves are a huge component of what we're doing, not just on barracks and facilities, but also just on way of life for Guards and Reserves. We want to make sure that we retain that incredibly important force. A good portion of our funding for barracks going forward in the next 5 years will go to Guard and Reserves, and I personally engaged on MILCON projects for Guard and Reserves. I've been working very closely with the team in Massachusetts on a Cape Cod project, MILCON project right now. We're keenly aware of the importance, and we very much want to make sure they have the best of the best.
Our Navy Marine Corps Reserves are using the same infrastructure, and so as we're considering where we are making investments, it is certainly integrated because of how integral it is to our training and all of the other elements that we've talked about with regard to readiness for the reserves.
Rep. Fenstead, thank you for the comment and the question. And I'm heartened to hear your words on this topic because the Air National Guard base in Minneapolis is a place that I learned about air power, and it excited me about pursuing my career in the Air Force. And congratulations on selection on receiving new C-130J aircraft, too. So I remain extremely connected to the Minnesota Guard and all they do for the nation. On your question, I just returned from attending Northern Edge, which is a large total force exercise that is conducting extremely important multi-domain training. Their facilities are facilities that are in my portfolio as well. And one of the most innovative points about it is they just broke ground on an all-new hangar. And the great thing about the innovative piece about that is that their hangar holds multiple weapon systems, not just one weapon system. It's a common hangar. So that was an innovation made by the Guard itself with help from state funding. So understanding how the Guard addresses infrastructure is something that the active duty can learn from, and I'm going to stay engaged on that subject, particularly when it comes to infrastructure. So you have my commitment that I'll continue in that journey.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I'll just close with this. The piece that resonates with me this morning is accountability. And after you had the opportunity to show us a few of these pictures and having the honor to travel around the country and see some of these facilities, I mean, we can do better. We must do better. It's not a partisan issue. This is an American issue. This is we owe it to our servicemen and women to do better.
Absolutely, and thank you for that, Mr. Finstead. And I agree. I can't imagine a hotel manager or a resort manager that wouldn't have lost their job if OSHA or anybody else inspected and found those kind of conditions. But with that, let's go to Ms. Takuda from the great state of Hawaii.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to have just two basic questions, one local, one global, and this is about the Navy water system in Hawaii. And while this is happening in Hawaii, sadly, we know, given the state of facilities, it's likely happening across the country. Ms. Berger, I am concerned about renewed complaints and reports of the Navy's water system on Oahu having visible sheens, as you know, strong odors, chemical tastes in their drinking water, their tap water. According to the State Department of Health, we've already received roughly 50 complaints about tap water and air quality from Navy water systems users. And unfortunately, we've had similar reports of this last fall when tested water samples had a handful of homes yielding trace amounts of diesel in their drinking water. And while the chemical signatures don't correspond with the jet fuel that was stored at Red Hill, where we had 19,000 gallons emptied into our drinking water system, impacting service members, their families, and civilians, it is disturbing at all that we're talking about chemical traces in our drinking water. The bigger question comes about, where is this possible contamination even coming from? The public deserves to know, our service members and their families deserve to know that their water is safe and clean to drink, and the Navy has a public health responsibility to urgently get to the bottom of this and make sure people know that the water that they drink, that they give to their families, is safe. Ms. Berger, what is the Navy doing to identify the causes behind these alarming reoccurring water quality issues, and do you have a timeline for when we can expect some real answers? And more importantly, what have we done to inspect and harden our aging infrastructure that likely has led to these leaks?
Congresswoman Takuda, we're concerned too. Anytime that we hear that there is a report of something that is wrong, especially when it comes to water, we are taking action and responding. And so first I'll tell you about what the Navy is doing since we heard these reports. As you note, there are about 50 that the Department of Health has identified for everybody that we can directly respond to. Individually, we have gone to the home or location identified. We have gathered information from the reporting individual or family. We have provided bottled water, and we have done testing to ascertain what the levels are in the water. Significantly, we have seen that every indication is below the 266 level of TPH, which is what the Department of Health and EPA have identified for safe drinking water standards. But there is something wrong, and so we need to see what is causing people to report that they are having an impact. The Navy has put together a team of scientific and communication experts, so not only can we do the science research, but also make sure that we are sharing the information with people. So Department of Health, Environmental Protection Agency, and Navy have set up a swarm team to look at the analysis, to look at the data gathered and analyzed to make sure that we are understanding what the source potential impacts both over the course of time and in aggregation can mean. We do not have all of that information yet, but in the interim, as we get information and can share with people what we are doing, we are posting on our website. We have phone numbers where people can call and gain information if they're interested. And also,
I appreciate that, Ms. Berger. Unfortunately, I have a very little time, but I want to harp on what you just said. We do not actually know what the impacts are of extended exposure to TPH, petroleum, in our drinking water, in our cooking water, in our bathing water. We do not know what exposure to lower levels of TPH in our drinking water, something we don't expect to find when we pick up our water to drink or to give to our child, what that could mean to both service members and their families, to civilians that are being exposed through these water system leakages and whatnot. So that is a big concern. And I want to make sure that as we go forward, we are consistent in the treatment of residents. We have found publicly, it was reported that residents said their home, was told by the military that their home was not on the Navy water line, denied long-term monitoring by the Navy, and then it was reverse coursed a few weeks later, again, eroding the trust and confidence that at the end of the day, the Navy has people's best interests in mind, both service members and civilians. I would actually charge, whether it be the pictures that we've seen or the water that our constituents in Hawaii are forced to drink, challenge you to live in some of these homes and drink the water. Give them to your children and your families and ask yourselves, do you feel safe? Knowing that, yes, it is below the 266 TPH level. But at the end of the day, if there's a sheen on your water and a smell coming from it, would you pick up that glass and drink it? Similarly, would you live in the housing structures that we have seen, sadly, that our service members, their family members are being forced to live in domestically and overseas? And Mr. Chair, I would like to enter into record some questions about our overseas installations and the state of the facilities there and what we are doing to make sure we improve quality of life, safety, and health for our service members, as well as to be respectful citizens in another country.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Takuda, and to Ms. Higgins, who has been a real leader and champion of quality of life of our service members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to just everyone who came today to testify before our panel. It's been a great privilege to sit on the Quality of Life Task Force with Congressman Bacon and Ms. Houlihan, and just to hear time after time about what our servicemen and women need in their families. Pay and compensation. Housing is always number two, though. Childcare, healthcare. So there's a lot of room for improvement. I'm just thankful to have your ear and that to hear your passion and to know that you prioritize it just like we do. I share having children who serve, so just thinking of them at every turn and everything that we do. And I wanted to just take a minute to advocate for OCONUS as well. And I know that Ms. Takuda just touched on that, but just recently visiting Japan and Okinawa and Kadena, they looked right at us and said, in 10 years, we can't do the mission that we need to do if we don't put some time and money into our infrastructure. I was just at Marine Corps Air Station Futenma. I know that base is what's going on. Is it staying? Is it moving? Is it, but the Marines there are still there. They're still 67 miles away from China. We have to continue to focus on those OCONUS housing and infrastructure issues. They don't have people like us that represent that come here and can speak about what those bases need. So please be their voices for them. I represent Virginia Beach, so I have Naval Air Station Oceana, the East Coast Master Jet Base, and it is pathetic. I get frustrated and angry every time. I always tell the base CO I'm their worst secret shopper. As a Navy veteran, Navy wife, I drive around there, I go to the commissary, I look at the housing every time I go, and it makes me madder every time I go. So there's a lot of room for improvement, and I know that you share those concerns. I wanted to take a minute and turn a little bit and talk about something positive, because I know that Secretary Berger and I have worked together many times. She's come to my district. Thank you so much for your advocacy. And one of the things that I talked about the first time I think we had one of these readiness committees was the fact that we had our junior enlisted moving into unaccompanied housing and paying for Wi-Fi. And that connectivity piece is so important. As a nurse practitioner, mental health care provider, I've been focused on that as well. And that piece alone, making sure that our junior servicemen and women have access to Wi-Fi, and the fact that we were charging them and moving them into crappy barracks and then charging them for Wi-Fi was one of the most frustrating things that I think I learned when I started doing this job. So I wanted to applaud you and just say kudos. Thank you so much for providing that pilot program for the Navy about, giving our servicemen and women access to free Wi-Fi. But could you please speak about how you did that? Because I know you've come up with some creative ways for funding and really thinking outside the box, which I think is what we need to do right now.
Certainly, yes. Thank you for the attention to our infrastructure and to some of the most pressing needs of our sailors and our Marines. And I want to share the credit with Fleet Forces and the regional command and local commands there who all took it on board too and made it happen. It is a use of the MWR funding. So very, very fitting in terms of what we mean when we talk about MWR and ensuring that we are providing our sailors with what they need. And so we have about 4,000 sailors right now who will have access to the Wi-Fi, and we recognize that this is something that will help them to access education, to stay connected with family. As you noted, there's everything from mental health to mission success that will come as a result of this, and so we expect to continue to demonstrate the value here. MWR funds go in a bunch of different directions, of course, and as is one of our themes for today, there are a lot of demands on some pots of money, and so as we recognize that this is a foundational requirement for our sailors and Marines, and I would venture to other service members as well, it is something that we'd like to be able to continue to provide in a very reliable way.
Thank you. And I would love to see that pilot program expanded to the Navy and to other DoD. And think along those same lines of thinking outside the box, I know we've talked a lot about privatized housing, especially in the Quality of Life Task Force. I am a big fan. I think that all the public-private partnership explorations, but the privatized piece, I would love to see those programs expanded as well. Mr. Owens, can you briefly talk about your plans for expansion? Because that's certainly a direction that I think we need to pursue.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. And just on the previous point about Wi-Fi, last week we got to agreement that the rest of the military departments have the authority to do exactly what the Navy did. So thanks to the Navy for leading out on the Wi-Fi piece. We're going to be getting after it with the rest of the services. On the privatization piece, the need is huge. All of the tools in the toolbox need to be leveraged fully in order for us to get after it. Privatization and ensuring that we learn all the lessons that we can about the MHPI process over the last 25 years are certainly a piece of that. But yes, we are absolutely looking at that as a critical aspect of how we're going to get after these challenges.
Thank you. Very important. My time has expired. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Kiggins. Ms. Escobar from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member, and many thanks to our witnesses. Ms. Jacobson, it's wonderful to see you again. You have been really wonderful to the military installation that I have the incredible privilege to represent, Fort Bliss, the second largest military installation for our nation. So it's great to see you, and thank you all very much for your service and for what you are working on. I share all of the same concerns that my colleagues do. This is my third term in Congress, and this has felt like such a chronic issue. Obviously, it didn't happen overnight. It's been something that has been chronic for a long time, and it feels like one of the toughest nuts to crack. So I have a couple of questions, just given what I have heard over my years in Congress. Are there any specific programs or initiatives aimed at addressing feedback and concerns from service members regarding housing conditions? That feedback, when I have had quality of life roundtables, one of the consistent issues that comes up is that many of our service members don't feel heard. That is something I hear over and over and over again. So I guess we'll start with you, Mr. Owens. Just thoughts on how those concerns are fielded and whether, how we act on them.
Thank you for the question. And I think that in terms of the way that we're trying to get after this, I want to thank the members here and Congress in general for the provisions in the FY24 NDAA that enable us to do more of that, require us to do more of that, because I think that feedback loop is critical to understanding what actually matters. And are we sitting in the Pentagon, spending time on issues that aren't going to resonate or aren't going to fix the problems that our service members are having right now. So we do have periodic check-ins, monthly check-ins with my Assistant Secretary counterparts. We have also stood up bi-weekly unaccompanied housing check-ins with my counterparts to make sure that we are increasing the level and the amount of feedback that we're getting through those loops. But we are relying on surveys that are going out periodically, and I'll let the military departments talk through those. But I think we can do better. I think we can do a lot better, and I think we can utilize strategies and technologies that aren't necessarily reliant on proactive response to a series of questions about what matters to you today. I know the Army did a barracks survey, and I think that a lot of that information was illustrative, but I don't think it's the most effective way or the most direct way to take the pulse of the climate right now. And we're exploring various different technologies and strategies that are going to be able to help us shorten that cycle time and really be on top of these issues proactively rather than letting this come up and then have to be assessed and have to be statistically parsed and sliced and diced so that we can then make an action, which then takes longer than it needed to. So we're trying to get after this in multiple different ways.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobson.
Congresswoman Escobar, it's wonderful to see you again, and such a pleasure to work with you on all matters for Bliss and Casnorane. I have to put that in. We did conduct a survey. It was referenced in the GAO report, but aside from the sort of multiple choice questions and so forth, we asked for the comments. And reading those comments was eye-opening, and we read them across the board, from Secretary of Army across the board. The other thing we've done is we recently convened a barracks summit, and while that didn't involve soldiers directly, some of the primary members of that barracks summit are the command sergeant majors. We asked the command sergeant majors to reach in and get input from the soldiers so that we could give those soldiers the better living experience, not just on the surface, but what is going to make their lives better. And all of us, to a person in Army senior leadership, when we visit any installation, we meet and visit with soldiers, we ask them the questions, we look at their conditions of their rooms, we try to really ascertain how we can help them.
Thank you so much. Ms. Berger, in the remaining 30 seconds.
In addition to what my colleagues have said, I'll add that we include technology, so QR codes, so that we can actually register and account for a timestamp affiliated with any complaints, as well as the Marine Corps initiative that I mentioned earlier, where there will be a wall-to-wall investigation, which will involve conversation results, all of which will help us to make informed decisions.
Thank you so much. I'm out of time. Thank you all very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar, and to Mr. Moylan, who's really been a tremendous add to this committee and given his unique and critical needs in Guam. Over to you, Mr. Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. Ms. Berger, thank you for coming to my office the other day. I appreciate our conversation, and I do appreciate you coming often to Guam as well. Your intention in there is really well received, and I know we have a critical mission for the United States, Guam, the most forward in our Indo-PACOM area. And now with the Marines coming on over, which we welcome wholeheartedly, and building the Camp Ben Blas is going well. Of course, there's a critical need for housing on Guam already. And our concern, of course, is already that we're relying heavily on the housing market to satisfy what we need to get going, to serve it, to provide for our families, the military families as well. But ultimately, it pays a price on residential housing for our community, such a small island. So give us your perspective on the portion of housing that will be needed on outside as well, with the Marines coming on over, and what's the consideration that you're looking at for the local residents on this effect that it would have on the housing market for the residents of Guam?
Half a day, Rep. Moylan, and thank you for your hospitality in your office, and when I have had the chance to visit Guam. As you note, it is an island, a small place. It is really the ultimate defense community in a lot of ways. There's such interdependence on the ecosystem, and the Marine Corps, as they are moving forward, is not taking that lightly. You note Camp Blas is moving along, but there is also the community element, and so the Marine Corps and Navy is going through and making sure that we do a housing assessment out on the market. That will be complete in March. So very soon, the work is ongoing as we speak, and I'll be able to give you with fidelity what that impact looks like. But we are taking into account a lot of the things that we talked about in terms of requirements for talent to be able to build if there is a need for build, the environmental considerations as we think about any sort of permitting or other places. So really that holistic look at what the impact is. So the work is ongoing. I will come back to you when it is complete this spring. And we are doing it with the cognizance of the perspective that you have provided. Thank you, sir.